Life is not a single unbroken line. It is a series of moments, and some moments are fractures. They are the fault lines that divide our existence into a before and an after. For Victoria Carson, that fracture occurred at precisely 1:23 in the morning, on a cold Thursday, as she collapsed at the service entrance of a Brentwood mansion. Barely conscious, she whispered through broken lips, "Please, don't send me away." For Tanyong Chu, the master of that mansion, a man who had built an empire on the foundations of emotional detachment, the fracture came in the form of 4 words. 4 words that would soon ignite the Los Angeles underworld. Who dared hit you? Neither of them knew that as the sun rose, the entire criminal ecosystem of the city would be holding its breath. They couldn't know that 12 men would be dead, that a war would be ignited over a violation of the underworld's most sacred, unspoken rule: you don't go to war over the help. You simply replace them. But Tanyong Chu was about to shatter every rule he had ever lived by. And Victoria Carson was about to learn that her carefully crafted invisibility was an illusion, that the most dangerous man she had ever known had been watching her all along. He had been rewinding security footage of her humming old Spanish songs as she polished his floors, memorizing her schedule without intent, and discovering that somewhere, buried deep beneath layers of hardened armor, he was still capable of caring. And in their world, caring was the quickest way to die. Before we delve into the night that changed everything, if you already feel the pull of this story, the tension between 2 worlds destined to collide, we invite you to become part of our community. By sharing this story, you help us bring more tales of hidden strength and unexpected redemption to light. May you find a piece of your own strength within the narrative that is about to unfold. Now, let us journey back 8 months, to the day Victoria Carson first stepped into Tanyong Chu's world and learned its unforgiving rules. 8 months earlier, Victoria had arrived at the Brentwood estate with nothing. $0 in her bank account, immigration papers that had long since expired, and a desperation so profound it felt like a physical weight pulling her down. The mansion was less a home and more a monument to power, a fortress of cold marble and black oak sprawling across the hills. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of a city where she could barely afford to exist. The chandeliers hung like constellations of frozen stars, and the silence had a presence. It was a heavy, oppressive quiet that pressed on your chest and served as a constant reminder that you did not belong. Her interview lasted 7 minutes. Tanyong Chu sat behind a desk of polished walnut, his stillness commanding the entire room. He wore an expensive suit that seemed less like clothing and more like a second skin. A faint scar traced a line across his left jaw. But it was his eyes that held the true measure of the man. They were gray, the color of a gathering storm, and when they fell upon her, Victoria understood the terror she had seen in the other maids. He didn't just see her, he saw through her, as if she were already a ghost. "You understand the rules?" His voice was a low, controlled whisper, the kind of control that hinted at the violence simmering just beneath the surface. Victoria nodded. She had been briefed by Rosa, the woman who served as a broker for undocumented workers, connecting them with jobs that were high-paying because they were high-risk. Never make eye contact. Never ask questions. Never leave a single object out of place. If violence occurs, you see nothing. If immigration raids the property, you hide in the panic room and you do not make a sound. The position pays $800 a week in cash. Room and board are included. You work 6 days with Sunday off. Outside of these walls, you do not exist. Do you understand? Yes, sir. Don't call me sir, he corrected, his voice flat. Don't call me anything. Finish your work before I return each evening. And stay out of my sight. He paused, and for a fleeting moment, something flickered in his eyes, not an emotion, but the shadow where an emotion once lived. People who cause problems here do not get second chances. They simply disappear. Are we clear? Yes. He dismissed her with a wave of his hand, his attention already returning to the documents on his desk, erasing her from his consciousness as effortlessly as he breathed. Victoria took the job. She took it because $800 a week was a fortune, 3 times what she could make anywhere else. She took it because her grandmother's heart was failing in a hospital back in El Salvador. She took it because desperation makes you brave in the most foolish of ways. She moved into a converted storage room above the garage. It was a 10 by 12-foot box with a narrow bed and a single window overlooking the back gardens. She had survived worse. This was just a different kind of war, and Victoria had learned long ago how to make herself small, how to become invisible enough to survive. What she couldn't know was that on the other side of the estate, in a darkened office she was forbidden to enter, Tan-Young Chu had already pulled up the security footage. He had already begun to watch her, driven by a compulsion he didn't understand and couldn't explain. He didn't know that 8 months later, when she lay broken and bleeding on his doorstep, he would realize he had been slowly, irrevocably falling for a ghost. The marble was always cold. It was the first thing her fingers felt each morning as she began her work, her touch tracing over countertops, floors, and the grand banisters that curved through the mansion like frozen rivers. It was expensive marble, imported from Italy, or so one of the other maids had whispered. Victoria didn't care where it came from. She only cared that it captured every fingerprint, every speck of dust, every sign that a human being had dared to exist in Tan-Young Chu's sterile world. So she cleaned. She erased every trace of herself with each swipe of her cloth. The hallways carried the lingering scent of his cologne, a dark, woody fragrance that announced his presence long after he had passed. Victoria had learned to navigate his movements by scent alone. If she caught that fragrance in the air, she would melt into the nearest room, making herself silent and small until he was gone. Sometimes, late at night, the silence would be broken by sounds from the basement. Muffled, terrible sounds that confirmed every whispered warning she had heard about the business conducted in this house. The first time, she had covered her ears and prayed until her knees ached. Now, she simply turned up the volume on her phone, playing her grandmother's favorite songs, pretending the distant screams were just the sound of traffic on a far-off freeway. Survival, she had learned, required a selective deafness. Every night, before she slept, Victoria knelt beside her narrow bed and counted. Not prayers, but dollars. She kept the cash tucked inside a hollowed-out Spanish Bible, a gift from her grandmother before she left El Salvador. The irony was not lost on her, using a holy book to hide blood money earned by cleaning a criminal's house. $7,000. Earned 1 week, one invisible day at a time. She had memorized the serial numbers on some of the bills as if they were the names of beloved children. This money was everything. It was her grandmother's heartbeat, converted into paper and ink. 8,000 more, and the surgery could happen. 2 more months of work, if nothing went wrong. If she wasn't fired, or deported, or swallowed whole by the darkness of this place. The other maids kept their distance. Not out of cruelty, but out of a shared understanding of survival. As one of them, Lucia, had explained, "We don't form friendships here." To Mr. Tan, loyalty to each other looks like a conspiracy. So Victoria worked alone, ate alone, and existed in a state of profound solitude within a mansion full of people. But she had her small rebellions, tiny acts of defiance that she believed no one saw. She hummed while she worked old Spanish folk songs her grandmother used to sing. Songs of heartbreak, of resilience, of women who survived men who thought they were gods. And sometimes, she would scroll through photos on her phone, pictures of her grandmother from before the illness. Her abuela, smiling in her garden in San Salvador, hands covered in soil. For a moment, looking at those pictures, the loneliness would recede just enough for her to breathe. She never knew that 3 floors away, Tan was rewinding the security footage, watching her smile, watching her hum, watching her be defiantly human in a house where humanity itself felt like contraband. The text message arrived on a Tuesday morning at 6:47 a.m. It was from Dr. Reyes, her grandmother's cardiologist. Victoria, your grandmother's condition has deteriorated. We need to schedule the surgery within 2 weeks, or we will have to stop treatment. The remaining $8,000 balance must be paid before we can proceed. 2 weeks. She had 2 months of work to do in 14 days. It was impossible. Her hands shook so badly she nearly dropped her phone. Thursday was her day off, the only day she was permitted to leave the estate. She would go to the bank. She would find a way. She always found a way. She had no way of knowing that this particular Thursday would be the last day she would ever walk through Los Angeles as an invisible woman. Tanyang Chu's office existed in a state of perpetual twilight. Heavy curtains shut out the California sun, and the only light came from a wall of security monitors, their cold blue glow washing over polished mahogany and leather. 12 screens, 12 different angles of his kingdom, a world he controlled with absolute precision. He should have been studying the quarterly reports detailing territory disputes and profit margins. The Rising Dragon Triad, a rival organization, had been testing his boundaries for months, and the Council of Elders in Seoul was growing impatient. But his gaze kept drifting to Monitor 7. The kitchen. She was there. Victoria. The ghost who had somehow become the only real thing in his carefully constructed world. He rewound the footage. He had watched this particular clip 17 times. Victoria, arranging white roses in a crystal vase, humming a Spanish song about women who survive. He watched her smile when the arrangement was perfect, a genuine smile that reached her eyes and transformed her entire being. When was the last time he had seen something genuine? When was the last time he had felt something that wasn't calculated, strategic, or weaponized? His hand moved to a locked drawer in his desk. Inside, beneath property deeds, was a yellowed letter. His mother's last note, written in Korean. Yong Chu, my son, in this world of monsters, I tried to remain human. That was my mistake. Don't make the same one. Survive. Even if survival means forgetting how to feel. He was 11 when he found her. It had been 19 years since he had decided she was right. So why was he watching a maid on a security camera at 11 o'clock at night? Why did his chest tighten when he saw her smile at photos of a dying old woman? The answer terrified him more than any rival gang ever could. The door opened. His second-in-command, Minjun, entered. The Rising Dragon situation is escalating, Minjun said, his eyes flicking to the monitors. The elders expect a firm answer. He paused, his gaze lingering on Monitor 7. You've been distracted lately. The men have noticed. It was the careful dance of a subordinate, a subtle warning that in their world, weakness is a death sentence. I'm handling it, Tan said, his voice cold. Minjun didn't move. Your father was distracted once. By a woman. It cost him everything. You remember what happened? Tan's jaw clenched. He remembered. His father, beaten to death over a territorial dispute he was too distracted to anticipate. His mother, consumed by grief. Get out, Tan said quietly. Alone again, Tan stared at the screens. He had to eliminate this distraction. He pulled up his calendar and began scheduling a full day of meetings for Thursday, all across Koreatown. He would be away from the estate, away from her. He wouldn't return until after midnight. He had no way of knowing that his decision to create distance, a decision meant to protect himself, would be the very thing that left her vulnerable, the very act that would nearly cost him the only person who had made him feel human in 20 years. The air was cold and sharp when Victoria stepped through the service gate just before dawn. The sky was a deep, bruised purple, and the streets of Brentwood were silent. Her mind was a frantic calculator of impossible numbers. $8,000. 2 weeks. By 3 p.m., after hours of navigating bureaucracy, she was defeated. "I'm sorry," the final bank clerk said, his voice devoid of sympathy. "Without proper identification, we can't process international transfers over $5,000. It's federal law." She wanted to scream that federal law was killing her grandmother. Instead, she walked back out into the cold afternoon with the same $7,000 she'd arrived with. By 9 p.m., she was miles from the estate, walking through the darkened streets of Koreatown. The bus would cost $2.75, nearly $3 that could go towards the surgery. It was 3 miles back to Brentwood. She could walk 3 miles. She had walked farther, fled farther, in El Salvador. The temperature dropped. Her thin jacket, the one with Tan's family crest embroidered on the chest, offered little warmth. Exhaustion made her careless. The alley behind the closed restaurant was a shortcut, one she'd taken before. It would save 15 minutes. She turned into the alley. 3 men materialized from the shadows. They spoke Mandarin, but their intent was a universal language. One of them pointed to the crest on her jacket. His eyes widened with recognition, then narrowed with malice. "Tell your boss," he said in broken English, "the rising dragon remembers." She opened her mouth to say she was nobody, that she just cleaned floors. The first punch landed, and her world exploded in a flash of white, then red. The violence that followed was methodical, impersonal. It was a message delivered upon her body. They cracked her ribs, split her lip, and left bruises that would bloom like dark flowers across her skin. They took her phone, her money, and the jacket with Tan's crest, the trophy they had come for. Then they left her. She lay there, praying not for herself, but for her grandmother. An hour passed, maybe more. Slowly, painfully, she realized she was still breathing. And if she could breathe, she could move. The 3-mile crawl back to the estate took her until 1:23 a.m. She couldn't go to a hospital. A hospital meant questions, police, immigration. She could only go back to the one place that offered any kind of shelter. She collapsed on the service entrance steps, just as the security light flickered on. 2 hours earlier, Tan-Yong-Chu was trying to focus. He sat at the head of a table in a private room in Koreatown, but his mind was elsewhere. An unease, a wrongness, was crawling under his skin. He ended the meeting early, an unprecedented move that left his lieutenants exchanging worried glances. Back in his office, he pulled up the security logs. His eyes found her name instantly. Victoria Carson. Departed 5:47 a.m. Status: not returned. The time was 12:23 a.m. She was always back by 9. At 1:15 a.m., he did something he hadn't done in years. He walked the perimeter of his estate himself. He was about to head back inside when he saw her. A crumpled shape on the steps. Blood, dark against the concrete. He dropped to his knees beside her, and something inside him that had been dormant for 20 years roared to life. Her face was a ruin. Her breathing was shallow. His hands, the hands of a killer, were shaking. "Victoria," he said, his voice raw, unfamiliar. Her eyes fluttered open, delirious with pain. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'll clean up. Please, don't send me away." In that moment, something inside Tan didn't just break, it shattered and reformed into something new, something dangerous. "Who dared hit you?" The question was a low whisper, the kind of quiet that precedes an earthquake. His men were gathering behind him now. They would later say they had never seen that look on his face. It was the look of a man discovering he was still capable of love and realizing that in his world, love was the most terrifying weapon of all. She managed to get the words out. 3 men. Mandarin. Koreatown. A message, the rising dragon remembers. They took the jacket with his crest. When she lost consciousness, Tan stood for 30 seconds. Then, he lifted her into his arms and carried her inside. "Call Dr. Yun," he ordered. "Now." He laid her gently on the bed of a guest suite. "Mobilize everyone," he said to Minjin, his voice devoid of all emotion but one, resolve. "I want names, locations, anyone connected to the Rising Dragon Triad in this city. I want them found. I want them brought to me. And I want it done before sunrise." Minjin hesitated. The lieutenants in the hallway exchanged uneasy glances. "You don't go to war over staff. You replace them." It was the code. But Tanyang Chu had just forgotten every rule he had ever known. By 2:15 a.m., they had the surveillance footage. 3 faces. Identified. Low-level enforcers for the Triad. Their usual meeting spot was a warehouse in Vernon. "Boss," Minjin said carefully as Tan reached for his jacket. "You haven't done field work in 4 years. Let me handle this." "No." That single word ended the discussion. At 2:47 a.m., Tanyang Chu entered the Vernon warehouse. He didn't use stealth. He wanted them to see him coming. His eyes swept the room and landed on a hook by the door. Victoria's jacket, stained with blood. The violence that followed was surgical, precise, and absolute. By 3:20 a.m., 9 bodies lay on the warehouse floor. Back at the estate, Lucia, the head maid, held Victoria's hand as Dr. Yun catalogued her injuries. In the hallway, her phone buzzed with a text from Minjin. 9 down. He's going to the next location. This is getting out of control. Lucia looked at Victoria's bruised face and thought, no. This is finally in control. For the first time in years, their boss was feeling something real, even if that feeling might destroy them all. At 4:30 a.m., the Triad's mid-level enforcer woke to find Tanyang Chu sitting in his bedroom. 5 minutes later, Tan had the entire chain of command. The enforcer did not survive the conversation. At 5:45 a.m., a package arrived at the Triad leader's private residence. Inside was Victoria's jacket, now decorated with the blood of 12 men. The note was simple: "Touch what is mine again, and I will dismantle your entire organization." This was mercy. Test me again and learn what justice looks like. As the sun rose over Los Angeles, Tan stood watching. He had just committed the ultimate sin of his world. He had let emotion dictate business. He had gone to war for a woman he'd barely spoken to. He had painted a target on himself and on her. He didn't regret it. And that realization was more terrifying than any enemy he had ever faced. Down the hall, Victoria was waking up, with no idea that the man who demanded she be invisible had just announced her existence to the world in a language of fire and blood. Pain woke her first. The room was not her own. It was a vast, cream-colored space, and the sheets felt like clouds. A doctor, an older Korean man, explained her injuries. 2 cracked ribs. A concussion. Lucia brought her soup, her stern face softened with something approaching sympathy. "You are to recover here," she said. "Your job is secure. You are under his protection now." Victoria stared in disbelief. Why would he care? He doesn't even know I exist. Lucia met her eyes. He knows exactly who you are. Later that afternoon, he appeared in the doorway. It was the first time they had truly looked at each other in 8 months. The scar on his jaw seemed more pronounced, the exhaustion etched deep into his features. "Why?" she whispered, the single word carrying the weight of all her confusion. "Why did you do this?" Tan was silent for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was raw, stripped of its usual armor. "Because when I saw you bleeding on my doorstep," he said, "I forgot every rule I've ever lived by." He left before she could respond. 3 floors below, his phone was ringing. It was a call from Seoul. The Council of Elders was demanding an explanation for 12 bodies, and a war started over a maid. The video call was a tribunal. 3 faces, carved from ice, stared out from his monitor. Elder Kim, the patriarch, spoke first. "Explain the 12 bodies, Tan-Yong-Chu." "The Rising Dragon Triad violated my territory," Tan said, his voice steady. "I responded." "You responded over a maid," Elder Choi, the enforcer, snarled. "We have the reports. You have been watching her for months. You have forgotten the first rule: attachment is weakness. Your father made this mistake. It got him killed. Have you learned nothing?" The words were a physical blow. "You have 1 week," Elder Kim concluded, his voice soft as silk and sharp as a razor. "1 week to prove your loyalty. Send the girl away. Prove she means nothing. Or we will remove the problem ourselves. Both problems." The call ended. Tan sat in the darkness, the ultimatum hanging in the air. His protection had not made Victoria safe, it had made her the most valuable target in Los Angeles. On the nightstand in her room, Victoria found a tablet. On it, the security footage archive. Her heart hammered as she scrolled through thousands of files. She saw herself humming as she arranged flowers, the camera zoomed in. She saw herself in her tiny room, kneeling in prayer. She saw herself tending to an injured bird in the garden. He had been watching her most private, most human moments. "He saw me," she whispered. The realization was both a violation and a validation. She found him in his office. "I saw the footage," she said. "You've been watching me for months." "Yes," no denial. "Why?" His control finally cracked. "Because I knew if I started to speak to you, I wouldn't be able to stop. My world destroys everything I love." He told her about the council's ultimatum. "They've given me a week to send you away. If I don't, they'll kill us both." Victoria should have been terrified. Instead, for the first time in her life, she felt truly seen. This dangerous man, this killer, had seen the real her, not the maid, not the ghost. And he had gone to war for her. Every rational thought screamed at her to run. But as she looked at the man who had broken every rule for her, she made a decision that would seal both their fates. She stepped closer, closing the distance between them. "What if I don't want you to walk away?" The question hung between them. "You don't understand," he said, his voice strained. "I've already painted a target on you." "I've been a target my whole life," she replied, her voice firm. "In El Salvador. in this country. You didn't make me vulnerable, Tan. You just made me visible. She met his gaze, her own resolve hardening. You've been trying to protect me as a liability. What if we prove to them that I'm an asset? The idea was insane, unprecedented. The council doesn't care about assets, Minjun argued later, horrified. They care about control. Then we change the rules, Victoria said simply. And so they began. Tan taught her the landscape of the Los Angeles underworld. Victoria, in turn, revealed the invisible networks of the immigrant community. The whispers, the codes, the intelligence that his organization could never access. For the first time, Tan's men saw him smile as she described the elaborate systems used to warn each other of immigration raids. You've built a network based on fear, she told him, her hand resting on his. We've built one based on survival. Days later, a retaliatory strike. A corrupted guard opened fire on the office. Tan shielded Victoria with his own body. The message was clear. She was a target. This is what caring costs, Minjun said grimly. But Victoria walked back out into the city, wearing a wire, gathering intelligence that dismantled 2 rival operations in 72 hours. She was not a weakness. She was a weapon. The final summons came. The council wanted to see them. Both of them, in Seoul. They sat before the 3 elders, a scandalous, unprecedented pairing. I am not here to prove she is meaningless, Tan announced, his voice ringing with challenge. I am here to prove the rule itself is wrong. Attachment is not weakness. Forgetting how to be human, that is our weakness. It is why we are losing territory, losing loyalty, losing our future. Victoria stood. The gangs that last longest are not the cruelest, she said, her voice steady. They are the ones that protect their communities, that give people something to belong to besides fear. The elders deliberated. When they returned, Elder Kim's face was unreadable. No one has ever challenged our fundamental structure, he said slowly. You are not challenging for power. You are challenging for evolution. He paused, and in that silence both their hearts stopped. You have 6 months. Prove your theory. Build a territory where loyalty is earned, not bought with fear. If you succeed, we will reconsider our structure. If you fail, the threat was left unspoken. But she, he said, nodding to Victoria, must be recognized as your partner. Your equal. Tan turned to her, giving her one last chance to escape. You can walk away free. Victoria smiled, the same genuine smile he'd watched on his monitors for months. I've been invisible my whole life, she said. Maybe it's time to be seen. 6 months later, sunrise painted the city in hues of gold and pink. From the estate's balcony, the world looked different. Their experiment was working. Their territory was a place where power meant protection, and loyalty was a bond, not a chain. Victoria's grandmother, healthy and vibrant, tended the roses in the garden below. Do you ever regret it? Tan asked, his arm around her. Every day, Victoria answered honestly. But I would make the same choice every time. Why? Because you asked the right question that night, she said, turning to him. You didn't ask what happened. You asked who dared. You saw me as a person worth defending, before I was useful, before I was valuable. You saw me when I was just a ghost in your house. She smiled. That's when I knew that the most dangerous man I'd ever met was also the safest place I'd ever been. Together they walked back inside, partners in a revolution born from a moment of unexpected grace. They had rewritten the rules of their world, proving that true power is not found in the cold fortress of detachment, but in the profound, terrifying, and transformative courage to care. May this story serve as a reminder that even in the darkest of places, the choice to see another person, to truly see them, holds the power to change everything.